The Meeting of the Transcendental Club, a skit by Kimberly S. Giles. One of the most important influences in the American Renaissance was that of the Transcendentalists, centered in the village of Concord, Massachusetts, and including Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, Bronson Alcott, and Margaret Fuller. The Transcendentalists contributed to the founding of a new national culture based on native elements. They advocated reforms in church, state, and society, contributing to the rise of free religion and the abolition movement, and to the formation of various utopian communities such as Brook Farm. The abolition movement was also bolstered by other New England writers, including the Quaker poet John Whittier and the novelist Harriet Beecher Stowe, whose Uncle Tom's Cabin dramatized the plight of the black slave.
In the summer of 1836, a small group of highly educated men and women living in the Boston area began meeting. They called themselves the Transcendental Club. Each of the members had a slightly different interpretation of what Transcendentalism meant, contributing to the difficulty in defining it. All of them, however, celebrated the worth of the individual and understood there to be a direct link between the human soul and a divine being. They believed that a person should know the truth intuitively, transcending knowledge gained through the senses. Scene 1. Emerson and his wife are in the parlor discussing the upcoming meeting of the Transcendentalist Club and the first half of today's agenda, the dial. Members begin to arrive.
What a lovely day, dear, for the planning meeting of the dial.
Oh, yes, I know this journal has been your dream.
That it has, yes, that it has. I trust today that Margaret will see clear to publish, in the first issue of the dial, my finest piece of literature to date, Nature, or at least the passage on language.
She will, I am certain.
Lydia, the country is changing. It is an American Renaissance of sorts. There are new lands, new men, and new thoughts. Let us demand our own works and laws and worship. Undoubtedly, we have no question to ask which are unanswerable. We must trust the perfection of the creation so far as to believe that whatever curiosity the order of things has awakened in our minds, the order of things can satisfy.
You couldn't have summarized your thoughts about nature better, dear. I'll get that, dear. Henry, so good to see you on this glorious spring day.
Yes, Lydia, good to see you too. Good to see anyone for that matter. I've just come from the Concord jail.
Jail? You tell me, young man. Whatever were you doing in that place?
I refused to pay my payroll taxes. You know, Ralph, I did it in protest against the pro-slavery agenda of that damn war against Mexico.
Civil disobedience at its best, Henry. The government must think we are as passive as John Locke.
Lydia, so good to see you. You are looking well.
Yes, Lydia, I haven't seen you since the last meeting to discuss the new schoolmaster.
Oh, yes, Elizabeth. How is he working out?
We haven't had enough time to form an opinion yet. We need to see how he satisfies the needs of the individual students. The school reform project of mine has taken up a life of its own, but so worthy it is of my time. I feel that I speak for Bronson as well in quest for school reform.
That is so very important, Elizabeth, isn't it? Gentlemen?
Ralph? Henry?
Hello, dear friends.
Tea?
Scene 2.
Call to order the meeting of the Transcendentalist Club. Today we are going to discuss the selections which we plan to include in the first issue of our new literary journal. I have a special guest here to tell you his ideas for the title of the periodical. Alcott, the floor is yours.
The title for the journal, which I am proposing, is The Dial. It is intended to evoke thoughts of a sundial. As we Transcendentalists know, a sundial points to the true north, and so shall our journal bring truth to the masses.
Ah, yes, the masses. You speak of my neighbors and the audience in the walls where I lecture, those whom I infuriate or inspire. They need to be self-reliant and think for themselves regarding their obligations to society and nature, and most importantly, to themselves. Perhaps the dial will help them see the light.
The dial. Quiet, please, my friends and fellow Transcendentalists. It seems we are all in agreement with the title proffered by Alcott. Our next item on the agenda then will be the content of the first issue. I will defer this part of the meeting to Margaret.
Friends, as you can see here, we have a quite lengthy table of contents, which I will not trouble you with at this time. This is the job of Ralph, Elizabeth, and me. I will give you an overview, however, of course. Our focus in the first issue will rely heavily upon essays and writings to forward the cases of nonconformity, self-reliance, and anti-institutionalism. And my personal favorite, self-culture, which I insist pertains as much to women as to men. First, we will hear from our recently incarcerated friend, Henry.
While in the Concord jailhouse, I scribbled out resilience to civil government. I beg your consideration. This excerpt for the first issue of The Dial. Even as crucial as environment concerns, and even anti-slavery, I insist that all principled action must be undertaken by the individual rather than through groups. With this, I am saying that all actions must be by the individuals and based on individual morals. I address many things in the aforementioned essay, and I will begin by sharing some of my thoughts on government. That government is best which governs not all, and when men are prepared for it. That will be the kind of government which they will have.
So are you saying, Henry, that you do not think that men need to be governed?
It does not keep the country free. It does not settle the West. It does not educate. The character inherent in the American people has done all that has been accomplished, and it would have done somewhat more if the government had not sometimes got its way.
So you feel that the government holds its citizens back?
There will never be a really free and enlightened state until the state comes to recognize the individual as a higher and independent power from which all of its own power and authority are derived, and treats him accordingly.
We shall see this happen upon the eve of school reform, right, Elizabeth?
Right.
I'm simply saying that we cannot let government overrule our conscious state of mind. If we could let that happen, well, permit me to close with this thought, my fellow Transcendentalists. If a plant cannot live accordingly to its nature, it dies, and so does a man.
Hear, hear. All those in favor of including civil disobedience in the first issue of The Dial respond by saying, aye. Then I should like to share one passage from a piece for consideration as well. It will be titled The Great Lawsuit, Man versus Man, Women versus Women. A call of sorts for the equality of women. This passage should eliminate my point, after which you may vote to include it or not. It is therefore that I would have women lay aside all thought such as habitually cherishes of being taught and led by men. I would have her, like the Indian girl, dedicate herself to the sun of truth, and go nowhere if his beams did not make clear the path. I would have her free from compromise, free from compliance, from helplessness, because I would have her good enough and strong enough to love one in all beings for the fullness, not the poverty of being.
So are you saying, Margaret, that women are to go through a personal revolution in regard to their societal roles?
I am, Elizabeth.
But we may still love all, including our husbands, but because we wish to love them, not because it's our duty.
You've got it, Leah. Now all of those in favor of including my piece, based on this excerpt, in the first issue of The Dial, say aye.
Aye.
Splendid. Let's end the editorial portion of our meeting with an upcoming poet, Mr. Walt Whitman, who has been so kind as to request an audience with us today. Walt?
Thank you, Margaret. I'll begin by addressing Ralph Emerson. Emerson, I have answered your call in the poet to address all the facts of the animal economy. I have done it free from the constraints of meter. Leaves of Grass meets the challenge offered me, saying, American is a poem in our eyes. In this collection of 12 poems, I have experimented with a new form I call free verse. I cannot begin to wish for you to entertain even a fraction of my work based on American experience. The Americans of all nations at any time upon the earth have probably the fullest poetical nature. The United States themselves are essentially the greatest home. So I'll share but a verse, so that you can hear and feel the essence of Leaves of Grass. This is from Spontaneous Me. Spontaneous me, nature, the loving day, the mounting sun, the friend I am happy with. The arm of my friend hanging idly over my shoulder, the hillside whitened with blossoms of the mountain ash. The same late in autumn, the hues of red, yellow, drab, purple, light, and dark green.
Bravo, bravo, bravo.
As if I need to ask, all those in favor say aye.
Aye. Let us break to stretch our legs and meet back here in 10 minutes to continue with today's second topic for Transcendentalist Club, the Panic of 1837. We will discuss its impact on the current depressed state of our economy and whether this crisis should be blamed upon Andrew Jackson and our government alone, or if the banks too, namely the Second Bank of New York, are equally at fault.
As you wish, M, but I feel a number of us here would prefer to continue our literary discussion and perhaps coerce Walt here into sharing more of his poetry.
Mark my words, Elizabeth, you just witnessed Whitman, who will go down in history as one of America's greatest poets. And I say that full well realizing that his poems don't even rhyme.